Hello, I'm still very, very sick, so I wanted to go back and actually dig up something for you from Degenerate Plays, a conversation I thought was pretty interesting, which was about game development and the culture in game development companies. Now, I will say this is not the same for everybody. Obviously, I think most people on both sides are very normal, well-adjusted people, whether they work in game development or whether they work at your local 7-Eleven or they're a business executive that plays video games. I think a lot of people in the space are just normal, nice people. They go about their business. You don't hear anything from or about them because they're just average. They either like or dislike stuff and they move on. But I think that the outliers on both sides really suck. And I wanted to talk about one side in particular today because I've had a lot of interactions with people who work in this industry that have kind of told me this. Not everybody, but a decent amount of people, and it's frustrating. And I will also say that the focus of this discussion is hatred from the side of companies. I do want to add that we mentioned this in the discussion, but it is still a big deal and a big point that there is a lot of unnecessary hatred from just average people lobbed at employees of game companies and other companies as well, right? I think we all know this. The reason I want to say that, though, is because I'm sure that some people will think that I'm ignoring that by talking about this and not mentioning that. So I think that if you're a jerk, you're a jerk. It doesn't matter if you work somewhere or you don't and you're directing it at mid or top level employees or whatever. I've always thought that the best way to try and get your points across was to not be a douche. But I know a lot of people don't think that. So you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments down below. But let's just hop right into the discussion.
It used to be, why did the standard shift and when did it shift so much to where like people used to, I mean, it was year to year, massive features were added to these games and huge difference makers, and they clearly spent a lot of time the second the current game was launched on developing new stuff in the new game and implementing the feedback that they got from people. You even said in your video today, like the
Need for Speed video.
They're saying the Need for Speed thing. They're saying like, yeah, we took your feedback and we're doing this. It's like, what feedback specifically? When did you do this? What are you talking about?
Because, then they tell the guy to go fuck himself.
Yeah, it's like
for like asking that.
It's like, dude, like you didn't take anything that I asked for into consideration, and now we're sitting here and it's like, yeah, you get 3 days early access for this stuff, and that's what you asked for. It's like, no, I didn't. No. I asked for a specific mode, or I asked for you to change this, or I thought this would be a fun thing, and everyone agrees. There's thousands of people that are talking about this. Why didn't you add it in? It just doesn't happen.
And then you tell people to just fuck off.
Yeah, and then you tell them to suck your dick.
And you know what's unfortunate? That Need for Speed account, that Twitter account, I think personally that the Need for Speed Twitter is just showing you how they all feel behind the scenes and just don't say.
Yeah.
They feel like,
which
go
is
fuck
kind
yourself.
Of sad, man.
Like when you tell them like, hey, I don't really like this. Go fuck yourself.
So you think it kind of like bled through the cracks, is what you're saying? Like that wasn't supposed to come out, but it did.
I think that it was supposed to come out from that guy, because I think he's trying to be funny and trying to be witty and trying to be like the Wendy's account. But I think that they don't want that look out there, because I do think that's kind of the corporate level attitude of gamers are idiots. They don't know what they want. They've got no idea. Don't listen to them. Tell them to piss off, but don't actually tell them that. Just tell them, like, we've taken your feedback into consideration and we appreciate you being a fan. Well, really what it means is, like, blow it out your ass. Like, when I read a comment and it's mean, yes, I'm not going to take that into consideration because you're being mean.
Yeah, it's not actually constructive.
That's different. But if I read a comment and somebody says, hey, man, this loud noise at 10 minutes hurt my ears. I've gotten that a couple times. I look at that and I say, okay, what was the hard limiter at for that? Wasn't high enough. I'm sorry about that, man. You know, like I'll try better on my time. I will try better on my audio mixing, you know? Or like when people say like, hey, Jay, that, you know, the way you said that really was really not cool. Like maybe you could, you know, talk about that in a more professional way, or like not, you know, be so rude about it, something like that. But they're not telling me like to eat, you know,
kill yourself,
eat a dick. Fine. You know, like I will take those things into consideration because I'm not perfect. I think that the attitude at the companies is, guys, look, we are corporate suits. We have millions of dollars, if not billions, and we got here for a reason.
Yeah.
We're rich. They're not rich. They don't know what they want. They don't know what's good for our company, so they can suck it. And then at the development level, it's Genuinely, because I've literally had friends in QA, like quality assurance game testing. You know what it is? It's at the development level, we are game developers. We went to school. We know how to code. You're just playing our game. So shut the fuck up and tell us if you glitch through a wall at some point. Don't tell us that it's not fun. Don't tell us that this isn't good.
Gosh,
and I've seen, like, there are messages like that sent between the development at certain huge companies that I'm not going to name, but you could probably guess.
Yeah.
Down to lower QA people when they try and tell a developer, to the point where they can't talk to developers anymore at a lot of companies. You know what they do? Wow. You know what they do? They have a middleman. So they'll have a management of the QA team, of all the QA teams for a building or something, and that management will talk to the developers for them. And they're not allowed to be mean to that management. So like the developers, it's like, if you're mean to this manager, you're gone. You can't do that. But the manager will relay all these new pieces of news for you from the QA because you guys can't get along. Because you tell the QA they're know-nothing dumbasses who could never make a game on their own. And so then you'll get in a huge fight about that and you'll look like an asshole. But then at the same time, you will have these developers then, lash out at gamers. So it's like every level above lashes out at the level below. That's what I'm saying in game development. It's such a political game. It's such a unfortunate way to run your industry where it's like cutthroat, get to the top at all means. People end their lives, dude. Like, look at all this stuff with like allegations in the workplace. They'll go ignored for years. People end their lives. Then there's other allegations in the workplace in these gaming studios that are false. And, you just have like a lot of miscommunication, blame games, and really toxic work environments and cultures that there's no policing of. Like, nobody's really, it doesn't feel like anybody's trying to make it better. And this always has a trickle down. Like it trickles down. Corporate's toxic to the people under them. The people under them are toxic, like those mid-level managers are toxic to the developers. The developers are toxic now to the QA for getting their opinion. The QA is now toxic down to lower QA, And it just trickles down this like anger and bad vibes. I don't know how to say it other than that. And then, you know what? Eventually that hits gamers. You get the developers on Twitter, or you get the mid-level managers on Twitter who say, fuck you. Or you get the Need for Speed Twitter accounts who say like, you know what? I'm not going to get fired anyway. So like, suck my, I mean, they didn't say that, but it's like, that's the vibe you get from the manager, from the tweet of like, well, why don't you go cry about it? That's really what you're saying.
Which is once again, that's a crazy approach, because you're going to get, yes, there will be some cucks online that'll not be helpful and provide just meaningless feedback.
And will be mean.
And will genuinely be mean, which, fine, yeah, do not take them into consideration. I completely I understand not doing that. But
yeah.
There's also the guys who are just genuinely like, hey, this is not working well. I think we should probably switch this. If you're not going to take that into consideration, especially when you're making a game year to year, it's different if you're making a game like, even then you should probably take it into account, but say you're making like more of a one-off game, like a Horizon Zero Dawn, or like even like a Red Dead that you're not going to make a ton of, over and over again. Still good feedback to make when you're making another game, but not something you really need to implement right away. It's like something, we'll take that into consideration if it matters with our next project. If you're looking at like a COD or a sports game and you're not going to take this feedback year after year when you're continually pushing a new product every year, that's a problem. And like I 100% agree. That's where the corporate kind of cockiness and ego comes in.
And that trickles down too.
Yes.
To every level. Like genuinely, there are a lot of companies where the developers, I don't agree with attacking game developers, by the way. Like if you're online and you are a person and you want to talk to Joe Cummington and he made my favorite game, and you want to talk to Joe and say like, hey, listen, I really like this game, but as a massive fan of this position, I think it could be done better. The vibration in the controller wasn't great here.
Was not enough.
You can certainly do that in a nice way. I think that for me, that cockiness passes down. It's genuinely like there is a scene in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. This is crazy that I'm using this, but it's a really interesting scene where you can be evil, right? And you go to Nar Shaddaa. It's this crime lord area, basically. It's like a city. There's a homeless guy there, and he asks for money. And if you tell him, like, kill yourself, which you basically can. You can call him, like, a worthless, dirty peasant and say, get out of my face. You literally can. Now, what happens is...
Good job, idiot!
That's basically what it is. And you know what they show? is it's a lesson in the Force, because then your mentor is like, you know, that doesn't end with him. And it's like, well, what do you mean? And it shows kind of like how he goes off and then passes that pain on to someone else.
I see.
And it's almost like a cycle of abuse type thing. I
Yeah.
think these corporations, they do that a lot. There's a cycle of negativity and abuse. And so maybe a gamer says the wrong thing, or maybe they offer feedback and it's like, well, my bosses don't listen to me. You can't even code. Maybe you have a channel with 2 million subscribers, but you can't make a video game. Why should I care about your opinion?
Right.
Even though millions of people do. And that's where I think it's bad. Like, you should take into consideration everyday people. Because you know who's an everyday person? Someone like, even if I don't agree with them all the time, someone like Angry Joe running like a huge YouTube channel who has criticisms of games that I don't even always agree with. But guess what? Hundreds of thousands of people are willing to watch him and listen to his opinion. You don't think
before they buy a game too? Like, they'll take it like, oh, well, he said this sucks, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, that matters. And like, you think that just because he's not out there coding, that his opinion doesn't matter? That's really, there's a lot of hubris in that.
It's pretty naive,
you know,
honestly.
like, dude, and I'm not saying this in terms of like a low level position. I'm just saying this in terms of being at a job. When I was at a job, when I was teaching kids, there were people who were not teachers who had good advice.
Mm-hmm.
There were.
Yeah.
And there were ones who had bad advice too. You got to sift through that. But to ignore all of it because they're not a teacher too, the level of hubris and self-centered, know-it-all energy coming from that kind of mentality, it's insane.
Crazy. It's
and
crazy.
There's a lot of that in gaming, and you will see developers go on Twitter and talk about how gamers are stupid and they don't know what they want and they'll buy it anyway. And
is that just because of how much money they make, do you think? Or is it like, what does that have to do with?
I think it's the people above them doing the same thing. I think it's their bosses, their corporate bosses. So like, you'll have Alan and he'll talk to his boss and he'll say, this is a great feature for the game. It'd be great. And his boss will say, you don't know what makes money. You don't understand how to run a company. Fuck you, basically. But in like a backhanded, nicer way, right? Now, Alan will encounter some gamer who says like, I think this would be a great feature for the game. And instead of passing that on or trying to make it happen, Alan will do the same thing. He'll say, you don't know how to code. You don't know how to make games. I'm up here busting my ass and getting shit for it. And I genuinely think that's what it is passing down a level of like powerlessness. So like, you feel powerless as a developer, or you feel powerless as a mid-level manager instead of an upper-level manager. So now you pass that down to an employee or to a customer, right? That happens all the time in the workplace. It happens all the time in retail too, where you'll have a guy having a bad day and he's going to make sure you do as well. I'm sure you've encountered that in jobs you've done.
Well, yeah, and the problem with that too, like you said, is that's a management thing, because if you don't create an environment that kind of fosters like, hey, we take feedback and like feedback's okay.
And just because this is a normal gamer doesn't mean that he doesn't matter.
And just because that it's a mistake doesn't mean that you're bad at your job. It just means that we're going to evolve from this and be better.
Right.
Instead of it's like, oh, you made a mistake, you suck, dude, and get out of here. Like, that's it. Like, that's the difference, I think, is like, you kind of have to have that established to where it's like, well, actually, like, we want feedback. Give us everything that you got because we want to get better, because we clearly aren't going to make a perfect video game. It's never been done before. So let's see what you got, give us feedback, and we'll take it into consideration. And that's cool, and that's fine. But that's totally a management thing. And that's, I think, what your point is like the manager levels feel very superior to everyone that they're dealing with, because I think of how much money they make and then the impact that they think that they're making on the world. It's like, well, I've sold 20 million units of this game. Clearly I'm important, and clearly I make stuff that really matters here. It's like, well, sure, 20 million units, but the reviews stink and your game isn't good. It's broken. There's glitches everywhere.
And you made those decisions, and you made the people who can make those things better do your idea instead.
Correct. And now we have a bad product. And yeah, sure, you made your money, but now you look like an idiot and you don't care, and you're completely pushing that off and being defensive about it.
They pass that down, though, too, to the people under them. You know, a good example of that, I know you're going to leave here in a minute.
No, that's right, yeah.
A good example of that for me was the whole thing with Bethesda and Obsidian when they were making Fallout New Vegas. Now, I don't know why, but a lot of Obsidian employees have said since this, there's no bad blood between the companies. So when I talk about this, I'm not trying to like dredge up crap.
Yeah.
But the general TLDR was, hey, listen, the situation was kind of like, hey, listen, if you can get above this review score, you will get a bonus on top of your commission. But they created a work environment where they couldn't make a game that would get that review score because they were so rushed. So now they don't get that bonus, and they get blamed for it, but Bethesda still makes all their money. They just don't give as much of it out because they're off by a couple of points. It was literally off by like 2 or 3 points, too.
That sucks.
And so that kind of stuff, too. You have a lot of companies, every level, it's always the guy below you is the one who suffers.
Yeah.
Whoever's at the top is like trying to be bulletproof. And I think that's a problem with like social hierarchy structures in general. Like if the president makes a mistake, the vice president's talking about it on the news.
Yeah.
You notice that?
I'm not dealing with that.
It's not that guy.
Or
it's,
the senior,
please take care of this.
Or the press secretary or whatever is having to eat those questions.
It's somebody else. And I think that the attitude in our culture, and in every culture, by the way, this happens in Japanese game development as well. I will say at a Japanese game development level, the upper level developers are much better, though, at being willing to admit when they're wrong.
Well, and look at, listen, not to interrupt, but like look at Nintendo games when they come out, typically, and given there's been some issues, I think, with this most recent Pokemon launch of like graphics
Scarlet and Violet
being a little bit sus and things like that, but for the most part,
sus. That Pokemon's looking at me weird. Is that Pokemon into me? I might be. Is that Mr. Mime?
It's a little predatory, I'll be honest, but like
I'm gonna stuff Mr. Mime. Oh shit!
But they usually are pretty. They've got a track record of launching with really good games and doing a good job. And that's because, like you said, it's a different culture. Like they take the feedback and they actually want to launch games well, because Nintendo has now established a reputation of, we don't release bad games. We don't release poorly, not ready to go games. With the exception being this Pokemon game a little bit from what I've seen. But I haven't played it yet. But my wife just finished the Pokemon game prior to that and had a blast.
Sword and Shield or Legends Arceus?
Legends Arceus. Yeah.
Did you like that?
Loved it.
I want to play that too, and that's
just finished it.
Well done game.
Great time. Open world. Loved it. And so like they do a good job with these things. So I think that's kind of where we need to get back to being the baseline of like kind of where Nintendo's at, which is a high place to reach for. Don't get me wrong. But it didn't used to be that far off a few years ago.
And they've had their own troubled times where you see like their hubris, like the Wii U.
Yes.
They crashed and burned in
Not
that
perfect
era.
at all. No.
Because like as much as I love the Wii U, they weren't willing to put the effort into marketing it. So a lot of people, they had made so much money off casual gamers, which is not an insult. It's just the everyday people are like, I'll play a game, a few times a week. I'll buy the console, whatever. It's not that expensive. Those people had a Wii. And when you tell them now it's the Wii U, a lot of them thought it was just an expansion, like an add-on to the Wii. And they're like, I don't really need that. I play my Wii a couple times a week. Whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
So then the Wii U's not selling. And then you have the gamepad, which was supposed to be innovational, but it had problems with breaking. And now the people who did buy it are having problems with the system sometimes. And then you have the problem with Nintendo basically making statements at the time of, we don't need third-party developers. We have our first-party games. Those will bring people in. So all of a sudden you have no sports games. No, you know what I mean? You're losing all the casual gamers.
Right.
And they, I think that I think to me, it's, like you said, it's that management ideal. And even, I think it trickles down even from the owners. I think that's the biggest place it trickles down to management from, because the owners, they aren't even gamers usually. A lot of times the owners of game development studios, you know what they are? They're investors.
Yeah.
They don't know video games. They know money. That's all they know. And so you're taking their feedback, but then you're saying that the gamer feedback from the people who actually play the games isn't as useful because they can't code. But the investor feedback is useful just because they have money.
Right.
What?
Where are we getting our feedback from? What are we doing?
What's the logic here?
Yeah.
And I understand the logic is they own us. At least admit that. Mm-hmm. You're not taking feedback from people who play the game who could make it better. There are a million people who play NBA that could come in as like idea people and at least give feedback that could improve the games, and then someone else could implement it.
Correct.
But there's also this attitude in gaming I've seen, especially on social media, of like idea people suck. I've literally seen, I saw a thread, it got like fucking 50,000 likes from like game developers and shit, where there was this one game developer like arguing about how like, every gamer thinks they have ideas, but they don't know how to make games. They don't know this, they don't know that. And it's not helpful. Nobody likes the people with ideas. They like the people who know how to do what they're told and make the game and this and that. And you could tell, like, I don't want to get into doxing this person, obviously. Yeah. Like, that's why I'm keeping it a little vague here. You could tell they were passing that attitude down. Like, you could tell they must have had some kind of experience with their management of like, hey, listen, I know how to make this game better. It's, shut up, you're the coder. you're making the world. You don't have an input in it. Just make the damn thing. And so now their attitude is, I can make the damn thing. I don't need someone with ideas because no one listened to mine. It's just passing down that anger.
That's crazy to me. And not to keep going back to Nintendo, but look at Nintendo. They passed off. They said, we don't need those third-party developers. We don't need that stuff anymore. They then adapt, change, say, oh, we're going to launch the Switch. We're bringing back MLB. We're bringing back NBA.
We do need them.
We're bringing them back. We do actually need them.
And you know that at a corporate level, there was somebody who had some embarrassing discussions of like, look, we fucked up.
We messed up. Yep.
We alienated you last gen.
Which is something that needs to happen, which I don't think is happening in some of these areas.
It's not even happening in the company with the people below you, let alone intercompany.
Right. And that's the problem that I have is like Nintendo was able to say like, hey, listen, this was not a good idea. This is not working. Launch the Switch. And then launch it with a bunch of different titles aside from just Mario and Super Smash. Like, we need more stuff. We need to be able to bring people in. Switch gamers also want to be able to play sports games and want to get into these different things. Fortnite, bring it on. Bring in all of these things. Let's just broaden the horizons as much as possible and adapt and change from what we're doing. And now look at the Switch. I mean, it's killing it still, and it's been out for a while now, and they're doing really well.
I read with that they did have to convince some of those sports game, teams and investors and stuff, hey, it's worth making a version for our console.
Yeah.
Because like they lost them with Wii U, where they basically said, well, we don't need them anyway. It's like, well, okay, that's not how you run a business. You don't say we don't need them anyway. That never works out.
No.
It never works out. And you see it, that attitude too, you see a lot with corporations and stuff of like, well, anybody who voted this way is a racist and we don't need their money. And then 6 months later, why are we failing?
Yeah.
It's like, well, because you alienated a bunch of your consumers instead of doing the product and focusing on the product. You tried to drag more stuff into it. And you have the right to do that. That doesn't mean it'll be good for you.
No.
It also doesn't mean it'll make good products. And I know we got into this from COD originally, but like, it's just frustrating to me that like you could sit down with teams that make the NHL games, and I bet you have an idea that can make the game better.
I have 15 that could make it better. And the thing is people have been asking for things in features for that game for years that have not been added in.
But most people wouldn't take you seriously because you're not a game developer.
Because I don't know code. Yeah, so that's the problem. And that's what I think is the issue.
Your idea is valueless.
It doesn't matter.
Even if it's a good idea, because you don't know code, it's valueless.
Yes.
That is hubris.
Well, what's even sad about that is a lot of the time it's asking for features that have been taken out of these sports games. It's like, I just want it back. And they're like, well, you can't do that. It's like, well, no, I just want what you did before.
Like Madden,
do that again.
I just want to be able to go to training camp again and have it be like it was in 07.
Oh, that's funny. Can you code? No, you can't, so kill yourself. How's
Basically, that's kind of what it is. It feels like a South Park parody when you're talking to people. Like, there's no reason. Like, even for me, I don't talk to game developers and give them my ideas. Yeah. I could. Mm-hmm. I could easily reach out to them.
Well, your videos kind of do if they watch them. It's like, we'll take some of these ideas into consideration, maybe.
And, I have 113,000 subs. I know I struggle with views a lot of times, and I know things are hard, and I'm not up there with PewDiePie or any of those guys, but, like, people do. There are people who genuinely, to my astonishment, give a shit what I think about stuff. I barely do, so I don't know how you do, but they do. And, there are a lot of people who would alienate me from that. And say, like, well, he doesn't know how to code, he doesn't know how games work, he doesn't know this, even though he's been playing them for 15 years, so even those opinions don't matter.
Yeah.
So now take someone with less social power and following, and you have someone with 10 followers on Twitter who has the best idea of all time, and you give him the finger because he doesn't know how to make games. That's just, you should be trying to take there's like a Bible verse about this, man. I don't remember what it is, but it's basically that a fool rejects wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't know, like what Bible verse this is, but it's something I thought was interesting.
No, that's definitely the idea behind it, though.
Well, yeah, where it's basically like the idea of like, it doesn't, you could get, bro, if I'm teaching at a school and a parent of some other kid that's not even in my class has an idea for how I can reach out to kids and help them, I am a fool to ignore that.
Yeah.
And I've seen like things like wisdom come from the most benign places, like in terms of people who aren't involved in an industry or aren't involved in this or that. Dude, McDonald's is as big as it is because some guy who knew how to invest came in and knew nothing about food and changed things. Mm-hmm. Now, did he do it in some mean ways? Yes. But my point is, something happened from somebody who had nothing to do with the food industry.
And a lot of that is just asking questions and being able to do that and knowing that you don't have all the answers. And I don't think people are always willing to do that. They put ego over viability, and I think that's a big problem. It's like, we're not going to, like, I don't really care about, like, the long term here. Like, I did good. I'm important. That's what matters here. It's like, so don't step on my toes.
Well, and there are things that hurt my feelings, but, like, literally, I get ideas for videos that I then go on to make.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'll get ideas in my Discord, or I'll get ideas in my comments. And, you know, I could certainly adopt that attitude of, like, well, where's your channel? Where's your subs?
Sure.
How many subs do you have? How many videos have you made?
Yeah.
But if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. I don't care if this guy has never made a video in his life or he's made 5 billion. It's a good idea.
Yeah, and I'm going to do it.
Why am I going to ignore that? Like, what do I gain from being a prick?
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. It's just... It's literally, I don't know. It's so frustrating to me because that's really what it comes down to is I'm better than you.
Yeah.
I know more than you. So anything you offer me is worthless.
Yeah. I know.
You're not going to get far in life doing that.
No, that's a sad way to approach it, honestly.
You not being able to collaborate, not being able to take ideas, not being able to talk, and just making people feel small, you won't reach that point if that's how you present yourself outwardly at the very least.
You'll limit your own growth so much, I think, yeah. And I think that's part of the problem. Like, coming back once again to that, is there's not a lot of growth happening. We've now kind of stagnated with some of these games and some of these franchises. It's now kind of hit like a stagnant, boring point. And I think that's the problem, is like we're not willing to really take the feedback. And now here we are, where it's like I'm just looking forward to some of these single-player games that I can play that are actually new and they've actually taken feedback. They're trying new things.
You and I are losing our voices.
That is crazy, yeah.
We talked way too much.
We did. We never talked this much.
We got to be done.